Hi, my name's Shalen Sehgal and I'm from Crises Control. Crisis Control today offers organisations, public and private, globally, a mass communication tool to help those organisations communicate reliably to their people. This video series brings together some industry-leading experts in the fields of business continuity, resilience and emergency planning to help share with you some of the insights that they've found through their experience. In the first video of our series, I will be interviewing John Deverell. John Deverell is an ex-senior British Army officer who today advises organisations, governments and enterprises around the world on risk and on crisis communication. John will be advising us on what a good business continuity plan looks like.
I'm John Deverell and I founded a company called Deverell Associates. I've been dealing with crises now for 35 years. And what I'm going to give you is part of my experience and knowledge. I want to talk first about what is a potential crisis. My view is unless people know what one is, they don't even know it when it hits them in the face. So what is a potential crisis? To my mind, it's anything which can cause significant damage to personal, business, to reputation, and maybe also to legality. It can be caused by any one of a number of things. There are many examples, and some of the most damaging can be completely banal ones. Just little incidents like defaulting on debt, like failing to communicate properly to investors, to stakeholders, such things as data theft, such things also as counterfeiting issues, stealing intellectual property, or maybe succession planning gone wrong, or perhaps a physical accident, a key person or key people travelling and sadly meeting their death. And these things usually, if they're handled proactively and quickly, can be dealt with without causing a crisis. But in so many cases, the small banal things, if they're not properly and quickly handled, can spiral into a crisis, and that'll go straight to the top and potentially fatally damage business. This is a curious psychology, and we're all prone to it. We all know we have to do things, but we don't. In the case of business, it's very often a very simple dynamic, which is to make the numbers. And the make numbers is the primary focus, and therefore what could go wrong, what I would call all the what-ifs, don't get considered in good time. So how to prepare? One of the key things people need to do to prepare is to have a plan and to rehearse it. Without that, people are lost. It's not so much the plan, it's just the fact they've thought about things, and that makes them much more agile to deal with stuff. Something to bear out the importance of a plan. Colleagues surveyed a whole load of managing directors from many sectors. They found that 87% of the MDs agreed that having a plan was really important, and yet only 24% actually had a plan. In people's minds, they know it's important. It's not urgent until it actually happens. And my point would be, once it happens, then of course automatically, by definition, we're on the back foot. So the benefits are really twofold. One, practical, because the plan sets out how people should respond in good time. And two, psychological, because what it means is they won't get frozen by being faced with an issue, which happens to all of us from time to time if we haven't thought about it in advance. They can get straight on with the job. And also psychological, because it means they're not just facing and thinking about what immediately faces them, but they'll think also about the tail. There's almost always a tail to serious crises, or potential crises, twofold, one reputational and two very often legal. And people need to start thinking about the tail also straight away. So a double enablement, both practical and also psychological. The plan covers all the mechanics, who's in the team, also, as we Brits would say, the second 11, so if any of the key people are not available first time round, their deputies are straight away available. And I would say for your typical company of a certain size, typical entity, it should absolutely include the CEO, because he or she needs to be there. At the end of the day, the buck will stop with them. And also, of course, the other key people, the chief finance officer, if the company has one, if it's a listed company, then head of investor relations, head of security if appropriate, head of IT, because of course so many of the dramas now are IT related, whether it's cyber attack or GDPR, loss of key data. And also, for example, general counsel, they need to have the lawyer. If they don't have a lawyer, then they probably, if they have any sense, they'll have a retained lawyer they can bring in. And also comms. Once things go public, it's so important to have the communications people. And again, I would say as far as rehearsals are concerned, the other really key point along with having a plan, because a plan's no good unless it's rehearsed, it's very important from my experience to get the comms people and the lawyers together. The instinct of the lawyers is to say almost nothing, because they're worried about imputations of blameworthiness. But in effect, if they sit down in advance, looking at hypothetical scenarios with the comms people, a lot more can be said which completely aligns with what is today is the key requirement, is to be transparent and be open. So 40 years ago, we could have said no comment. That doesn't wash anymore, and rightly not. Crises can only be sorted out by team play. Accountability is really increasingly a key issue. And I'll give examples of that. This is not just sentiment, this is backed up by law. So one goes back to things like the Corporate Manslaughter Act, 2005. When that first came in, people said, oh, well, that's not going to be much difference. But since then, a number of CEOs, over 10 CEOs, have been personally put in prison. It's typically either for two things. Either it's a health and safety fatality, which could happen in any company where people are coming in and working physically, or it's typically somebody who's died in a care home. In each case, no doubt, the CEOs have said to the judge or whoever is presiding over the inquiry, I can't be blamed because I was hundreds of miles away. It was about 15 levels below my level of command. But in each case, the judge has said, no, you have quite clearly failed to put in place the procedures and the training, not to eradicate likelihood, but to reduce likelihood down to a minimum. And therefore, you too are going to prison, as well as people who directly caused it. So other examples too. In the financial sector last year, 2017, the Senior Managers and Certification Regime came into force, SMCR, or SMR for short. And what that does with banks, it places a very personal liability on senior directors for what happens lower down. So to take an obvious case, LIBOR rigging. In a number of cases, the person's concerned have gone to prison. But the difference as of last year is now the directors at a senior level could also find they're in serious trouble. What's interesting about that is next year, 2019, the whole financial sector becomes subject to this. And that means 47,000 additional firms, insurers, asset managers, the lot. And that's actually doing what a good company would already been doing, what good leaders and managers already do, which is take direct responsibility for what happens lower down the company. And also people lower down the company, going back to the issue of building trust, then know also their backs are being looked after by the guys at the top.